Welcome to the Gregarious Mammal Podcast. This is Chris.
And this is Cate.
And we're doing the usual thing that is done at this time of the year and having a roundup, a look back on 2017. What a year it was. It was quite busy, actually, wasn't it?
It was.
I did a little, I don't think I've done it for you yet, but I did a little stats count up in a 2017 review post. Nothing particularly interesting post, but just to get some numbers. I wrote about 115 articles, as well as documentation stuff. I would think you'd be about the same. I made 52 podcast episodes. I'd say for you, probably about 20-something maybe. I spoke at 25 conferences and meetups in over 12 countries, which I was actually surprised about the 12 countries.
You have travelled a lot this year.
Yeah, and that doesn't include personal travel. And it also doesn't include places I travelled to more than once. Like I didn't include Germany 4 times in that number. So I'm actually quite surprised it's that high. Yeah, I don't know. I would guess you would have some similar numbers on the articles, but yeah, it's been a funny year. Like we've done a lot, but I think we've also kind of I have the feeling I've fallen into that area where you're sort of just writing, and when you write especially a few articles a week, a lot of the time you just sort of write things, and sometimes some articles just sort of vanish into the wilderness and others are popular, and I don't know, it's sort of funny when you get into that level and that regularity of writing that sometimes what you write just sort of somewhat vanishes into the woodwork. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's odd. I mean, like my one of my most shared posts was a very brief post I did on from memory. It was to do with AI and retail, like the retail environment. Very quick post, just a quick wrap up. And it was probably my most shared, and it was really annoying because it's kind of like, you have all these posts where you've interviewed people and you've transcribed interviews and you've done research for days and you've kind of really put some effort in, and then something you just knock off quickly. It captures the interest. It's very unpredictable, that kind of stuff sometimes. It's
like those social media posts that you consciously craft minutes and minutes into making them sound just right, and they get no discussion, and then you post a cat picture and it gets lots of discussion.
Very true.
So, yeah. And, it's been an interesting end to the year. We're going to do a little bit of our sort of favourite few things of the year, a few predictions for 2018. But actually, we also had a busy end to last year. Well, I did. I went to last week, well, not last week, this week, actually, to CCC, Chaos Communication Camp, the infamous Chaos Communication Camp from the Chaos Communication Club, Chaos Computer Club. Ugh. Although, as I discovered, it's not so well known to Americans as I thought, because they kept asking me, what's CCC? It's 34th year, I'm not sure if it's first year, but after a long run in Hamburg, it moved to Leipzig, which is where we actually used to live, so it was a good opportunity for us to go and see some people too. It was interesting. I guess let's start, because I've spoken too much already. Let's start with your sort of, I guess, perspective of someone who didn't go, but also a perspective of someone who didn't go and didn't necessarily know much about it, and just what's your impressions of what it is and what it's about and what it stands for
Chaos Communication Camp. I mean, I don't know that much. It's one of those conferences that is a little bit of a click in that you need to be referred by people to get a ticket. I did try and get a press ticket, but I couldn't get one. My understanding is it's basically a bit like a Black Hat conference or a DEF CON conference, except it's not limited to cybersecurity researchers and experts. It's people that are involved in all kinds of levels of looking at cybersecurity, whether they're just makers and tinkerers and sort of, your home enthusiasts, or they're people working on a more, more of a platform level.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't even know if that's correct.
Well, yeah, it is and it isn't. You're sort of partially correct. Like there's definitely people on their small projects. There were also plenty of people on their big projects. There were people from commercial companies like Cloudflare. There were people who probably tried to hack Cloudflare. So it's a real kind of interesting mix. They had Snowden join them by video, of course. And some other very famous people, some very famous people in Germany, some very famous people from other places. I mean, like 15,000 people, and some of the talks, the audience was huge. Like it was actually quite amazing to see how large some of the attendance was. I suppose my perspective was it was sort of more and less than I was expecting in every way. I was expecting maybe more. I was expecting to have to worry about my internet security far more, and I didn't really, as far as I know. I was expecting it to be a bit more chaotic, maybe. Well, I don't know. It was weird. Like, this is the strange thing. I spoke to some people who've been before and said it was the same in Hamburg. It's in like a real kind of Messe fair building. And they'd done a very good job of they could within those confines of making it like another world. You know, there were actually people sleeping there, and there were makeshift structures.
Yeah, I saw photographs
and makeshift kitchens and power and internet that they must have laid on themselves. And I would imagine that convincing a convention centre to let you do that would be pretty phenomenal.
Very unusual.
Yeah, but at the same time, I found for anarchists, they were very big on queuing, and is very traditional in Germany, telling you to queue and do things that make no sense whatsoever, because that seems to be tradition in queuing in Germany. Do
you want to maybe tell us some of the talks you went to?
I'm
workshops?
I'm getting to that, yeah. I went to... I kept things fairly low-key. I didn't throw myself in too much for reasons I might go into in a minute. But I saw talks from a Cloudflare engineer about how they identified a major security flaw in some encryption algorithms. I saw talks on automated weapons and how they should and could be regulated. I saw talks on tricking machine learning algorithms. I saw a lot of lightning talks on a very wide variety of topics. I saw a talk on how to find hidden microphones, like a real kind of broad gamut of things. I guess my perspective was... So I guess the other conference I've been to that's a little bit like it, but probably less from a cybersecurity angle, is FOSDEM in Brussels, which is coming up in just over a month, actually. And the first year I went to that, I felt extremely isolated. It's a community that has this persona of being... I've written a lot about this, but this persona of, the outcasts getting together. But the outcasts can be just as cliquey as the non-outcasts when they all get together. And if you're not part of their group, they can be just as isolating to you. And often, because I mix up in so many circles, it sometimes makes these sorts of people a bit suspicious of you as well. And I found this my first year of FOSDEM. I really didn't have a very good time, actually. I felt very lonely a lot of the time. Second and third year were better. So I tried to have a bit more of an open mind with this, of thinking the same thing, that it's a community that probably even more so is a little bit unwelcoming to strangers for a variety of different reasons. The nice thing of it being in Leipzig is we had friends and stuff there anyway, so if I wanted something to do, it was easy to find someone that we knew already. But yeah, that was a bit of a downside.
I mean, how do you get around it, though? I mean, the problem I've seen with a lot of these kind of niche topics is that you do have communities where people know each other, and there may be people that only get to talk online other times of years because they're from all around the world.
It's true.
And of course they want to meet and hang out together. How do you make people... I mean, I would always say if you want to get make an event more welcoming. If you don't know anyone, you turn up, maybe do some volunteering or ask to if you can help with something. It's just as a way to kind of meet people. But I mean, I'm not sure how much organisers can really address that kind of stuff.
Oh, I know, and I think like I found sort of the chaoticness of it sometimes frustrating as well in terms of organisation, in that I would look into finding assemblies around subjects I was interested in and then try to find them and there was no one there. Or they just never responded to you, or, you know, they're using ways to communicate with each other that they know. And this is often a problem with the open source movement in itself, in that the open source movement, certain members of it can be very dedicated to using particular tools. But if you don't use those and you don't know about them, then you've got no chance of even finding them in the first place. Yeah. It's strange. Sometimes open can be very closed in a strange way. It was interesting. I would recommend going, and I'd probably go again, and I'd probably do a bit more research and a bit more pre-arrangement in the future. It was certainly an experience. I think I would do it again. But actually, and one thing we wanted to talk around, this is sort of an interesting one, and actually I sort of saw tweetings of it and mumblings of it on Twitter, but then Cate was actually the one who kind of did more research into it to me. Maybe you want to bring up briefly, because it's not new news, but a certain topic around certain attendees of the conference, and then I will give a perspective.
Yeah, I mean, there was an issue because a man called Jacob Applebaum attended the conference, an American man who now lives in Berlin. From what I can see, I'll just get his Wikipedia so I can actually tell you who he is with any conviction. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, he's basically a cybersecurity researcher, a hacker, and a journalist. I think he does some art kind of stuff as well. And it's probably most known for being involved with the Cult of the Dead Cow Hacker Collective, and also Tor. That was the Tor project. And I mean, whenever I hear these kinds of allegations, which are coming out more and more, I think this year has been the year of Me Too. In not only tech, but in pretty much every sector you could possibly imagine. Basically, the man is accused by a number of women who've been to police and so on of sexual harassment, rape, using force against women, sexual assault, etc., etc. And women that felt threatened because of his knowledge of cybersecurity, that he would be able to hack into their computers or find things about them or so on. And basically the reliability of the claims, if you like, was such that he's been removed from a number of roles within the US and also internationally. He's also been banned by quite a few conferences, including this one, CCC, last year. And the reason I found out about this was because one of the women who'd been assaulted by him was at the conference and discovered that he turned up. And everyone was kind of like, well, why is he allowed to attend? Because this guy's been excluded from the conference for his behaviour against women. And, you know, look, seriously, if you Google his name, the articles will come up. There is a lot of articles that...
and a website that looks like it's his website is actually a website against him as well.
So look, you know, I'm not one to kind of just say, oh, there's this claim of one person's done something bad. It's actually, from what I can see, to be fairly substantiated stuff. But in turn, you've also got a sort of a double issue, which is that he has been notably treated very poorly by the justice system in the past, and by securities in various countries because of his role with WikiLeaks. And also his relationship with Edward Snowden. So there is issues there as well that, you know, and it would be very easy for someone in his position to say, to blame everything on those, you know, oh, it's people against me, it's the government, it's all this sort of stuff. But there's certainly no suggestion that from what I read anyway, and as someone who worked in sexual harassment for 10 years and represented people on both sides of the whole thing, the claims do certainly look very credible. And I guess the bigger issue here is about, firstly, I know it's something we've spoken about before briefly. Firstly, that conferences should have a code of conduct, and secondly, that there should be a dispute or a means to be able to, stop people attending.
Yeah, and actually, I think the enactment of a code of conduct is actually the more important thing in some respects. I sometimes feel like a lot of conferences now, and CCC had it a bit, and I think this is possibly why, they go overboard in paying lip service. No, that sounds bad to say that, but they go overboard in showing a demonstration of code of conduct and accessibility and inclusivity and things like this. But you do wonder, like, if the shit hit the fan and someone actually had an issue, what would happen?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And you're not sure, of course, and you half hope that you'd never have to worry about it. But and especially events run by panels and by committees, like, yeah, how would you actually, and who would even have the power to actually deal with an issue?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. And I mean, I don't want to go too much into the actual issue itself because it's old news and it's also something we've covered in other aspects of on the podcast already. But I actually just wanted to read a couple of quotes from some articles around the accusations last year that sum up some interesting things, and we'll come back to them in a minute. So first, I'm going to read a few paragraphs here and there. This is from a Desight article, quite a well-written article. First paragraph is: anarchists who hate the state take charges of rape into their own hands, and where normally there would be a court case, only rumours now prevail. It's also inexplicable why Mr. Applebaum, who, according to his own account, is the victim of false accusations, doesn't go to the police. And I'll just continue through a few others, because there's a couple, and there's some that are very interesting. So it's from the same article: the internet activists who are so courageously fighting against surveillance are now fighting against each other. Some in the anti-Applebaum camp are no longer showing up for the regular weekly get-together in Berlin. Apartment sharing communities are falling apart. Some hackers are even not getting involved in romantic relationships within the community anymore out of fear that they could be wrongly accused of something. Tor insiders report that projects have bogged down. Mutual trust, a key resource of activists, is destroyed. And one more from this article. When it comes to sex, power and drama, the hacker community resembles a hormone-loaded American college fraternity. Except that here, paranoia has long been running rampant. Members sleep with one another and think each other is capable of all manner of evil. There is no end of tales about who has already once accused whom of secretly working for the hated government. Even the most secure encryption can't save the revolution from eating its own children. And I think that last paragraph especially is, I don't know, somewhat representative of my occasional issues with sort of extreme communities. And I think that feeds a little bit into what I just said earlier about that sometimes these communities can be actually quite exclusionary and are in some respects no better than those times when people like us were in the school playgrounds on our own being ignored or abused by bullies, and we've just sort of taken that and put it in on our own at a micro scale at our sort of nerd community from them.
But hang on.
I don't know. Yeah.
We're talking about sexual assault here,
sorry.
and rape and violence against women. We're not talking about someone being, cliquey at a party or something.
No, but you're missing my point. Is that especially in that last paragraph, that these communities, and I think, as far as I can remember, a lot of the accusations in this case came from people who were mostly part of the community already. And I think my point and the point of this paragraph is that, to surmise, that sometimes when you spend a lot of time living on the extreme, knowing what is extreme or not, and what is acceptable or not, gets harder and harder to judge. And the manifestation of this is that it can be quite cliquey, which is one, I suppose, more minor manifestation. And then the other manifestation is that barriers and lines can easily be breached because people think that everyone is sort of so insular with each other that you can get away with whatever you want. And it becomes hard to tell the boundaries anymore, maybe. And then it has different manifestations.
But, I mean, we also had this year another cybersecurity guru or expert, or if you want to call him, what was his name? Morgan Marquis Boa? I'm not sure how to say his name.
Yeah.
And this was, women had been trying to get their claims of rape and sexual assault against him. Numerous women, again, heard for over 10 years. So there seems to be a bit of a pattern here of men in cybersecurity, or at least two instances that are quite big, where people that were considered, I don't know, gods or experts or having some level of acclaim, having this sordid history. And, you know, you need only look at the excellent reporting The Verge did in that case, where there were explicit cases of sexual assault and abuse by this man against women who had gone forward with it and had raised it. And again, the same kind of issues were coming out that we heard with Jacob Applebaum, where people had, you know, put forward claims and it had taken a while for things to happen or for things to change or for him to be removed from organisations or what have you. But it also... I guess, you know, there's two things that come up around this whole stuff as well that we can think about. One is what we've really seen this year is all these cases where women have come forward, where there's been abuse by men in positions of power. And it may be very easy as a listener to kind of think, well, you just go to the police, don't you? That's how you sort this stuff out. We know notoriously that rape is very, very difficult to prove. The number of cases, from memory of my rusty criminology statistics, something like 5% of cases actually go to court that get reported. Of those, less than 1% are actually result in a conviction. It's extremely difficult for people to actually get justice, if we could use that term, through the criminal justice system, the conventional court system. And when you think about the fact that women are saying, well, these are my workplaces. These conferences are a workplace. I don't want to have to deal with these rapists or these people that are well known, and it's been verified for over several years, attending these conferences. There should be some censure here. And I think that's, you know, and I think that article was a little bit offensive, actually, because it made quite light of it and made it sound like it was squabbling children, when it's actually, we're talking about victims of abuse here.
I think okay. I'm actually going to quote another article, and then maybe we'll come back to the same conversation, just because it's somewhat related and somewhat similar to that last paragraph. So this is actually from a Guardian article. Roth says Berlin's close-knit cyber activist community is likely to be no different to any other dysfunctional organisation or business that fails to properly address allegations of sexual assault and harassment. Sexual violence, she explains, is about the exertion of power, whether the power is defined by official rank or by social status. And in both cases, it is difficult for the victims to speak up. That relies on the goodwill of the aggressor, so without a formal allegation, victims often prefer to remain silent. And I think there's obviously a particular... Actually, I've got a couple more here. Let's go read a couple more. Violet Blue, which is one of the accusers, victims. Violet Blue claims that it was Assange and Snowden who helped to, and let's not forget that Assange has his own, Assange and Snowden who helped to elevate Applebaum to a position of power. Whether or not they knew about his behaviour, we need to look no further for proof that hero worship and the cult of belief is pure poison, she writes. This didn't happen because we're broken as a hacker culture or because we're hackers and thus too undeveloped to comprehend empathy. But others do feel the episode presents a challenge to the tech community. We need to ask ourselves which values we stand for, says a former friend of Applebaum. In Germany, we used to be connected by mutual trust and support, so taking advantage of someone's vulnerabilities damaged this safe space. I think maybe the subtext of the Zeit article, which you're referring to, is I kind of get what you're saying. And certainly around this specific issue, it is a little demeaning. But I think around sort of my earlier points makes a bit more sense around this aspect of that extreme communities that are comprised of people who live on the outskirts of quote unquote normal society, when they're all thrown in a room or a very tight-knit community with each other, it's very difficult to re-quantify what is wrong and right.
I get a bit tired of this argument that particularly men in tech are all, any of their social inequality or their social offences, if I can use that word, such as in this case rape and violence against women, should be explained away. The assumption, there might be a bit dysfunctional or a bit socially awkward or something. These people are not. These are people in positions of power. These are people that have been, received accolades and awards and been to universities and had jobs and gone for interviews. They're not, a little keyboard warrior who just hides behind a laptop. So they're people. Yeah. I think sometimes there's an assumption that people in tech are different. They're not. The assumption that, tech is somehow made up of these nerdy guys who just make mistakes and they're well-intentioned. It's not true, unfortunately. Sure, there are guys like that, of course. Yeah. There are guys like that everywhere. But there are certainly, and I think it's been shown very well this year, from people like some of the staff of Uber, to the way the company has dealt with their own sexual harassment claims and sexual violence, to the number of VCs who've been outed for sexual offences against women. I think we're mostly looking at sexual harassment there, not sort of like rape and that sort of stuff. Have been numerous this year. Women have been placed in vulnerable positions, and people going for funding. Journalists, other women in companies have spoken out and have made an issue. And I would like to think. How do I phrase it? I don't think this is going to stop anytime soon. I think we've just started with some of this stuff. It's been kind of brewing all year, and I think it started with the whole, perhaps when Trump got elected and people started questioning his views of women because of some of his comments that he'd already made on camera. It started there, and then people started taking a lens to their own environment, whether it was Hollywood or somewhere else. And We've seen people outed and we've seen people lose jobs and all that sort of stuff, but we've not necessarily seen the structures change yet. We've not seen, and that perhaps will be the next step that next year that we'll start seeing that kind of thing. People will start looking at their own policies and procedures and practices and education and all that stuff.
All right, Kate, before we move on to predictions, which we're getting a little close to, I guess you have a very different perspective on these issues. That's not to say that I agree with them, but you have a very different perspective for a variety of reasons, which you've expressed. And I guess as a non-victim, and also as a non-knower of, that I know of any victims as well.
You do.
I tend to,
you do.
Okay, well, that I know of, as I said. I tend to look maybe at people look at it from a different perspective, and maybe I see the less serious side of these communities, the just being a bit rude a lot of the time, but also that aspect that we have spoken about in previous podcasts. And I was having an interesting conversation about this with someone over the past week as well. And you just alluded to yourself, this kind of almost constantly giving engineers the benefit of the doubt because, poor them, they're all a bunch of weirdos, when actually that will have to stop being an excuse pretty soon. And that manifests itself in my personal sphere of interest in one way, and in other issues. And I'm not going to say more or less serious because it's hard to sort of to measure them against each other right now because things haven't all necessarily played out. But yeah, I think it's I guess there's a different aspect that maybe we could throw in here of this aspect of not only individuals taking responsibility, but taking responsibilities for your community as well. But yet again, as we've discussed, getting the people who need to hear this stuff to react to it is the challenge.
Yeah, and I know
the people who are already on side with this are not the ones who need to hear this.
Yeah, and I know women for a fact are very tired of making their own lives and experiences teachable moments for other people. And I think I would like to see a lot more policing and reaction from other men, because I think, unfortunately, I'd like to say differently, but I think men are most receptive to social controls from other men in general. You know, and I know this has been brought up in all kinds of contexts, whether it's to do with racism or homophobia or whatever, where when a man says something or does something inappropriate, men say, that's not cool, that's not on, why did you do that? You know?
Yeah. Okay, let's. This is a whole multifaceted topic that we have revisited over the year many times, and we're not going to come to any conclusion.
It's been a complex year for it.
Yeah, and we also disagree with each other.
Yeah, we
points,
do.
But that's half the point of having a podcast. So that's okay. But let's move on from this big, weighty, serious subject to some lighter things. Let's first look back. I mean, actually, we're talking about incidents that happened in late 2016. So let's come forward and let's talk about 2017. So, Cate, let's kind of let's tennis this. Let's ping pong it.
Yep.
You go for. Try and do three. I think.
Okay.
Number one of your favourite things of 2017 in your professional space.
I think it's anyone would say, you know, with conviction, it's the year of the ICO and the year of blockchain technology, where we've seen an explosion of companies that are bringing out coins, bringing out tokens, trying to use it as a conduit of fundraising, but also companies that are using the blockchain as a way of solving problems like using smart contracts in environments such as shipping and logistics, looking at ways of mapping and providing identification for people and for places, looking at ways of all kinds of stuff, really. I mean, I'm not really going to go deep into it because my brain's a bit tired today. And apologies for listeners, I've got a bit of a cold. But I think what's been interesting is, particularly in the last month or so, we have started to see, and I've noticed this particularly with the Australian media, there's been a backlash by the banks in Australia already to people that are involved in cryptocurrencies. Which some of our main Australian banks see as being involved in shady dealings or something like that, because they see it as, you know, not as legitimate kinds of financial transactions, and therefore closing down people's bank accounts. So I think we are going to see the banks hit back, and it's been a funny one because, you know, a lot of us have said, oh, you know, blockchain and particularly ICOs are being used as a means to challenge some of the traditional ideas of banking, like by creating decentralization and distributed distribution and all that sort of stuff. And now that banks are kind of either exploring it because they want to get in on it and get their own elements of control, or you know, providing these very sensationalist biased articles where they're censoring and questioning the legitimacy of cryptocurrencies. It's been super interesting. My other two, I'd really say...
one at a time. We're table tennis.
Oh, I think I misunderstood what you meant.
To be honest with you, I was going to go for a more personal angle on this, but actually, why not, Cate? You've actually, I think, possibly made it a more interesting subject than I was going to make this episode. So let's carry on. Yeah, I guess I almost wasn't going to include blockchain because it's sort of been up and down for me. I've seen some really interesting projects, and I'm more interested in how blockchain can be used for the non-financial stuff. The financial stuff to me is almost too obvious. I like it where it's being used in other things like IPFS and Filecoin and things like that. And I will link back to an article I wrote earlier in the year about some interesting projects that do that. But then I think for me, it got overshadowed by all the ICO stupidity. And that kind of ruined it a bit for me. And towards the latter half of the year, with the increase in cryptocurrency value, whilst personally we both benefited from that, it somewhat ruined things even more, because it just got hijacked by mainstream media and just became this kind of stock ticker that the media was just watching day in, day out.
Yeah.
And it somewhat ruined it for me. Actually, the positivity I had from blockchain earlier in the year was somewhat ruined in the latter half of the year. So yeah, I think I did say things. I didn't say necessarily best or worst. So let's go for that. Okay. So I think I get the feeling we're going to end up in agreement on a lot here. So all right. Throw number 2 at me, Cate, and we'll see how we go. See if I end up serving it back at you or serving you a curveball.
Yeah, I mean, wearables are an interesting area, and I've always been a fan of perhaps more the possibilities of wearable technology rather than the actual execution at present. And I think this year we've seen some real failures in that, for example, Jawbone and a bunch of other companies have just failed to really carve a place in the market. I know some of the other tech companies have reduced or removed their wearable divisions. So it's really, when you're looking at if I can call them the wrist-worn wearables, your watches and wristbands, I think there's been a bit of a lack of they're still only appealing to the early adopters. They've never really gone mainstream.
So this is a negative for
It's
you,
a
or
negative,
just a thing?
but
Okay.
but I think it's been a very good year for hearable technology. So whether it's your in-ear products like translators, or things like I've seen a bunch of devices that are embedded in glasses, or where people who are blind can wear the glasses with a little machine learning powered device attached. And I have written about this, so I'll stick some links in so people can have a look, where you've got someone who's remotely describing your 3D environment around you while the person's walking, so that they're not, they're able to actually feel like they're participating. It's not just like, oh, don't smash into something. They're actually being able to participate. I think we've also seen with wearable technology, there's been some developments this year of some really nice health wearable technology, and not all of it's come out yet. Like, I know when I was looking for examples, I know I wanted to mention some and realised they hadn't finished their products yet.
All right, well let's save that for our predictions.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'm glad you said that, because I have absolutely nothing to add on wearables. So we're not going to be in agreement here. That's good. So I think number 2 for me would be, I think how to phrase this. We're doing our podcast live here, and it's just started snowing.
Cool.
Look at that. And number 2 for me is, I think, going to be, I don't think of the right way to phrase this, but market on the edge, shall we say. We're used to talking about Europe and the US to a certain extent, and then also other markets too. But as anyone who follows any of my writing knows, I love to travel around places that maybe you haven't thought about. And we went to some very interesting ones this year. I went back to Serbia, and there's some interesting things happening there. But I think for me, my highlight was Ukraine, definitely. Really interesting things happening there. Really looking forward to going back and exploring Kiev and Odessa in 2018. And what we did discover was super interesting and super raw. So just a really opportune time to investigate a new market and take advantage of it. Sounds bad. Opportunities. Yeah. So I think that for me was my second thing. All right then, Cate. So Back at you. Number 3, your third and final thing of the year.
I think critical thought and ethics is probably my third one. I've noticed this year that people are starting to think more critically about the functions and the wherewithal and the whys and the hows of having technologies in our lives. And it's everything from people that formerly worked at social media outlets who've denounced the technology to people questioning things like the use of robotic weaponry and the bias of AI. And whilst I can't say with any conviction that these people are necessarily all going to be able to change the negatives of technology that we will see more of. I think that the fact that people are actually having these conversations and starting to think critically about it. Chris and I both got involved in a new organisation just starting called the Good Technology Collective, which is an international organisation that looks at some of these issues. And I think that this year we've really seen people kind of starting to think about, what kind of legacies do we want from technology in our lives? I mean, no one is saying no technology. No one is saying there's not going to be automation or AI or anything like that. But it's also been, an opportunity for people to start having these conversations and it not just being philosophers and people with PhDs.
That really wasn't very fair, Cate, because I would probably go for something very similar.
Oh, no, really?
I would just probably give you an agreement again. Well, maybe I'll go for a half one afterwards. I think I agree with you there. I'm not entirely sure how optimistic I am about predictions on this, which we'll come to very soon, about whether people will really change. But yeah, I think it was spoken about a lot more. An interesting perspective on this is I have heard some comment that some of the reasons why is because when it comes to tech journalism, especially, that kind of covering like startups and their products has become so common now and so widespread and so de rigueur almost, that a lot of journalists have been trying to find something else to write about because they're just bored about writing about Joe and his dumb idea yet again. So in some respects, I sometimes wonder if this topic got talked about more because of that too. There was something I read that talked about this a little bit. I'll have to figure out where I can find it.
I'd be interested to read that.
Yeah, I don't know, whatever the reason, then that's fine. I also, as well as this, the collective you mentioned, I have also been getting involved with a few people in Europe who are interested in setting up an aspect of the Tech Workers Collective as well, which is sort of more from the workers' perspective than the responsibilities for the worker than of the worker. But still, it's still early enough that there's a lot of sort of counter crossover in these things.
Do you mean kind of union kind of stuff too?
Sort of, and a lot of the people involved with it at the moment are more from union and lawyer background.
Interesting.
But I think you're right. I think it's been a year where at least people started talking about this more. Whether it will amount to anything, who knows? But I think people have been talking about it. I think I'm going to throw in one bonus one, seeing as you're letting me, because I let you go first and I ended up just agreeing with you. Would be actually, was 2017 just the year of the startup? All over. I mean, I already alluded to it a minute ago about just that almost press have got sick of writing about startups. Did we reach peak startup?
I'm always curious what delineates a startup versus a small business.
Yeah. Well, I think that's almost a conversation in itself, that we reached peak startup, including companies or projects that shouldn't even be startups. So in some respects, you're right there. So that'll be my half one.
That's a good one.
Let's move on to 2018, Cate. Let's gaze into the far distant future of next week. And what's your prediction number, however many you want to do, I suppose?
Yeah, well, like I alluded to earlier, I think there's going to be the evolution of some really good wearable medical technology. we've seen the evolution of that over the last kind of 2 or 3 years, with things like Dario and some other products, to deal with things like sleep apnea, to deal with diabetes, to deal with a range of kind of, I'm just thinking of the best way to put it. I'm not sure if, not biohacking, but maybe to do with some of the neurology kind of projects. And I think what we're seeing is, I know there's been the FDA in the US has been working with wearable technologists to make sure there are clearer guidelines so that people can go to market faster, and to make sure that these medically recognised devices are recognised and by the public as well. That I think that's something that does need a bit more awareness raising. For example, I remember last year it would have been, I was doing some research into diabetes because there were so many products on the market, from apps to wearable products, and then there was the whole biohacking scene where people with diabetes were creating their own products. And out of all the apps I looked at, there was only 3 with FDA clearance. And I think in the last year, there'd only been 2 products that had, I don't have to check my figures, 2 or 3 that had received clearance. Like, it's a slow, long, expensive project. Those that succeed are most usually people who are coming from a university background, so they may have been experts in a particular area of medicine or health, and then they've been able to extend it to the commercial realm. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. We're going to see more people coming out of universities and coming out of a more learned background in technology as well. People that are maybe on their second or third business or startup, if you want to call it that, where the business acumen and the kind of how to be a manager, how to run a business, how to manage finances, all that stuff, not just the tech, is really coming out. So we're starting to see more kind of responsible companies, and therefore more responsible investment. So they'll be the ones that expect to get investment.
I must admit, I don't tend to ever give that much thought to predictions. I think also I tend to write about so many wide things that I find it hard to even think specifically around particular topics to give massive predictions. I think I will piggyback off one that we said earlier, in that I definitely will see 2018 as an even bigger year of backlash against tech, and the year that tech is expected to do more beyond just making awesome shiny gadgets. What that exactly will mean is very hard to say, but I think there will be certain tech companies who at least try to demonstrate they're doing more, but more with actual meaning as well. Like, for example, much was made of Tim Cook from Apple being openly gay and thus supporting lots of kind of gay rights issues. But that doesn't necessarily counteract their terrible tax dodging. You know what I mean? It's almost like there's a bit of a magic trick going on with some tech companies. Like, yeah, but we're nice over here, but don't look over there.
Yeah.
And I think there's going to have to be a lot more holistic good behavior from tech companies in 2018, and that's not going to be good enough anymore. It's not going to be good enough to say, oh, we built a wind farm, but we've only paid $50 in tax.
Yeah.
You know? I think that's not going to be good enough anymore. That'll be my first prediction for 2018. You got any more?
Yeah, I reckon there's going to be some lawsuits
Well, of course
against.
It's going to be lawsuits. Yes.
No, let me finish. Against companies where they have insecure products or insecure protocols or platforms or what have you. For example, this year we saw Equifax, which had what was it? I haven't got the figures in front of me. But some massive proportion of the American population's data, basically through doing credit checks, and it was all leaked through. And they
handled it very badly.
And the handling was basically, if you want to get protection, you have to sign this document, but the fine print was that you can only get protection for a year. And we know that these kind of hackings, where people are getting your social security number, they're getting your date of birth, they're getting all that stuff, they're slow burn kind of stuff. You could be affected 10 years from now, in all kinds of ways, whether you try and get a loan and you can't, or something happens. And so I think there'll be more of those cases. I'd also like to say with that, there's been some pretty appalling cybersecurity when it comes to Internet of Things. And similarly, I suspect there'll be some lawsuits coming there as well, because we've had at least, there was a couple this year, one notable one, which was a connected sex toy, where the company was receiving data from the device while it was being used without telling the customers, and people felt very violated by that. So there's going to be, I know with GDPR,
yes.
I know that there's going to be more kind of push towards having things documented in plain language, shorter paragraphs and so on where viable, so that consumers are becoming more aware about this stuff. So they know what they're in for, and they know what they're signing, because it's been pretty amply demonstrated that people don't know what kind of data they're giving away and what kind of privacy and all that stuff.
And actually, an interesting one on GDPR is it's yet to see how much of an effect it's going to have on Europe and Europeans, in terms of some companies just saying, no, it's not worth it to do business with you anymore.
Interesting.
It's interesting because some countries in the European Union and outside of it have already had similar laws in the past.
That's right.
Around data collection and your right to access data and things like that. I'm pretty sure the UK has actually had elements of those laws for quite a while. I remember studying them at university, unless I misunderstood quite what form they took. So we'll see what happens there. Okay, I think number 2 for me, on a somewhat different bent, will be I think this was the year that Apple really dropped the ball with many things, especially in the latter part of the year. And I don't actually think it's going to get any better. I think this will be the year. It's already happened a bit, but I think this will be the year that a lot of people move away from Apple as a desktop operating system anyway, which pains me greatly to say, because I must admit I'm not massively liking of the competition, but I don't know, just many whisperings just don't seem to be like it's going to be something I'm going to want to use anymore. But to be fair, we've been here before. So
True.
I don't know if every year people say the same thing and nothing really changes that much. So we'll see. But I think Apple is going to continue to disappoint in 2018. That will be my second prediction.
Do you think someone will fill the gap?
No, I actually think I'm going to respond in a minute, because I think this leads into my prediction number 3. So give me your prediction number 3, Cate. Maybe we'll call it 3 and quits. Give me your third one.
Yeah, okay. I'm just thinking of one. Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of starting to move from, I guess, a lot of the use of IoT in collecting data, but we're getting a lot smarter with that data now. People are actually, the capabilities to be able to, assess that data, find the outliers, and use that to form plans of action, whether it's predictive maintenance, it is actual, forward planning, it's growing, knowing how much fertilizer to use on a crop, or it's planning travel plans throughout an airport. It could be anything really. But what I'm seeing in IoT is we're moving from, I guess, pilots to actual projects. People that have been working in some of these spaces for a long time, we're starting to see the real return on investment financially, but also in terms of creation. And one of the means for that has been AI. So AI will continue to be a big thing. And, it's funny, like, what I know there was a lot of buzz around AI the first half of the year, and then it kind of dropped off. It was almost like we got all excited about it, and then we kind of went, well, yeah, we've got it now. Everyone's using it. When they're not actually. They're not all using it.
No.
People are wanting to use it. But in terms of capabilities, the capabilities haven't been all there. But I think if I can tie in another prediction to that, I think the thing that will be a persistent pain point in 2018 and beyond is a skills shortage in tech. Particularly looking at areas like AI, machine learning, of course, data science, data analytics, some of the IoT areas, from the OT to the IT sort of crossover, looking at probably some of the cryptocurrency segments as well on the blockchain. There's going to be either a lot of people needing to skill up, and this comes into this whole thing that I believe in tech, that it's a sector of lifelong learning rather than just going to university once, or it's going to be people coming in and finding second careers, training for second careers.
Okay. I think I will counter one of yours and then one of my own. I actually will disagree with you slightly on the skill shortage. I'm not actually sure if this is a 2018 prediction, maybe a bit more further, a couple more years ahead, but I actually think that the worth of tech skills will actually start evening out and leveling out a bit in the next couple of years, and there'll be less of a big deal. But that's a more maybe further ahead than 2018. But I think I'm not sure if this is a prediction or a hope. I think it can be both. Sometimes you can make predictions that you probably aren't going to come true.
Yeah, of course.
And that would be consolidation. You've already alluded to, and so have I, numerous things where we've said something came along and then it sort of, everyone stopped talking about it. And then something else came along and people stopped talking about it. And that could just be us because we tend to jump around scenes a bit, so we get a bit of a mixed, broad viewing of everything. But I'd like to see in 2017, I'd like to see developers and business people consolidating things a bit. Stop creating duplications of everything, of ideas, of JavaScript frameworks, of blockchain frameworks, and actually starting to collaborate a bit more to build the real change instead of just keep constantly one-upping each other. I'd really like to see a bit of consolidation and a bit of collaboration, I think, in 2018. And I don't necessarily know if it's going to happen, but it would be nice to see, I think. Yeah, I think I'm always hopeful of that, though. And I'm always hopeful and it never happens. And also sometimes people, sometimes people point out to me that actually duplication and competition is also good. But I think there's a fine line, maybe. Where that fine line is, I'm not sure. But so let's move on. Okay.
And I was just going to say, I like the idea of consolidation. I mean, maybe we can consolidate some of the startups, some of the IT platforms, and maybe some of the conferences. Less of all of those wouldn't be a bad thing, I think. Yeah.
Well, let's just wrap up with more practical what 2018, got to get the year right, holds for us. On the most immediate future, I will be, I don't think you're coming, are you, Cate, at FOSDEM, back at FOSDEM in Brussels on the first weekend of February, where I am helping organise the Tool Docs room for people who want to talk about documentation tooling, a riveting subject. After that, I've got a few other things coming up, but nothing is completely confirmed yet, so that's the only one that's confirmed right now. I will hopefully be doing some work for a very major company, but I'm still waiting for the I's to be dotted and the T's to be crossed on that. Working on a few other articles here and there, and I'm hoping to have a bit more time to spend on some of my personal projects. So I think watch this space for New Year's resolutions there. With the podcast, we're going to be making a move back to video in the near future and trying to have a bit more video again. Now we're kind of comfortable in our audio again and got that nailed, I think. and I hope you're enjoying the new theme tune to the show. So expect a bit more polish here and there. We're also going to work more on getting some community forums for you to discuss what we discuss across various platforms too. We're going to get that set up in the new year. And we're hoping to get Cate to do a few more singular interviews, because generally at the moment it's me doing those and then us doing link shows, and I'd like to get you doing a few more of those.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, I do a lot of interviews. I just
don't record them.
I record them for transcribing purposes rather than interview purposes.
And what about for you, Cate? Anything in the immediate future you want to mention you're up to?
This year, it'll be an interesting year in some ways. I started working with a venture capital company late this year, helping them with some writing work, some research, things like that. So I'm hoping that will continue, because it's been very enjoyable and very interesting seeing the other side of things. I've also been working with a couple of cryptocurrency companies with some writing work there. As you probably all know, it's not unusual for journalists to work in writing because we get paid on time and we get paid as well. So I'm hoping that will both continue. I've also been approached to potentially work on a cryptocurrency publication. I know I've spoken before about some of the problematic ethics to do with journalism and cryptocurrencies, largely that as writers we get offered money to write about the companies, by the companies, as opposed to simply writing about them because they're interesting like we do everyone else. And so a friend and I are hoping to set up a bit of a publication where that kind of thing doesn't happen. It's unbiased information and it's interesting, and we'll be getting some good thought leaders on board as well. So if anyone's listening has a lot to say about cryptocurrencies, we would welcome your input. You don't have to be an expert. This is new, it is still relatively new currency. But we welcome people with inquiring minds that like to learn more.
Okay. And as always, you can find previous episodes and show notes at gregariousmammal.com/podcast. And you can support the show by rating us in any of your podcatching locations or at gregariousmammal.com/support. I have been Chris Chinchilla. You can find me at chrischinchilla.com or on Twitter at chrischinch. And Cate?
I've been Cate Lawrence, and you can find me at katelawrence.com. That's Cate with a C, Lawrence with a W. Or on Twitter, Kate_Lawrence, and with a C and a W in the Lawrence. God, that was a mouthful.
And thank you for all you listeners and comments in 2017. And we will see you. Well, actually, we may see you, or you may see us, in a whopping week in 2018. So,
Happy Christmas and New Year, everybody.
Well, I think we've already passed Christmas.
Well, I'm still saying.
We still have mince pies in the cupboard. Happy New Year, and I hope you have a good and safe New Year's Eve, and we will talk to you all again soon.